Hello, I'm Corey from Blue Falcon Board Gaming. For those who are new, I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran that started Blue Falcon Board Gaming in the Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky tri-state area. My goal of the group is to promote board games as a way for others to improve their mental health and to also make board games more accessible to those in the community by hosting and co-hosting board game events that are open to everyone. I'm super excited tonight. I've got Paul here from Honeybuzz and Genotype. And Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, Corey. Thanks for having me on, man. I do appreciate it. I am, I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm a amateur. Well, I guess I do make money, so I'm not a true amateur. But I do board game design on the side and development. But primarily, I'm a math teacher and a dad, and I make stuff. I run a little maker space at my school. I got my hands in a lot of different, activities, things that are going on. But for the last, I guess 7 years or so, I guess a little longer than that, but I've been doing game design pretty regularly, and trying to keep coming up with new stuff to put out there.
Gotcha. So with you said you're a math teacher.
Yeah.
Do you notice any occupations that kind of gravitate toward board games? It seems like a lot of the people that I've ran into at conventions, they're usually some sort of education field, IT field, or something along, computer programming, coding, stuff like that.
I definitely run into a lot of teachers, I think. And I don't know if that's just because there's a lot of teachers in the world, you know what I mean? Probably. But I guess it's partly, too, when I'm at conventions and people are talking to me, they find out I'm a teacher and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm a teacher, too. But also, I know there's a lot of game designers that are also teachers, like Mondo Davis is also an ESL teacher, Luke Laurie, who I really respect. Not that I don't respect Mondo. He's also cool. Luke Laurie is also a teacher of something. I'm not sure what, but I think that's pretty common for whatever reason.
Do you think there's a lot of overlap and maybe skills of having to, teach games that you're designing or teach games that you're playing, and then vice versa, stuff that you pull from board game mechanisms to make stuff click with students in the classroom?
Definitely for me, the way that I think about game design, a lot of my strengths come through both in the classroom and when I'm doing it. Making an experience that's clear and engaging and using language that makes sense, that all connects to the teaching side of things. But also because I have a lot of math experience, I feel like that shows up in my designs too, and the way that I sort of try to conceptualize a scheme for the game, that's going to come across, as opposed to I don't know, sometimes you play games and it feels like a couple different, they thought, well, here's a mechanism we can do to get resources, get stuff. And then here's another mechanism where you can dump those things. And I want something a little more cohesive, and elegant in a way. And I think the way that I think about math and my education in math has kind of set me up for thinking about that. But at the same time, those same principles apply to when I used to do music, or I used to do mathematical art for a while, and whatever kind of a person you are, however you think about the world, it's going to show up in the way that you make games or the kind of stuff that you like when you play games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what got you into playing board games in general? Was there a certain person that introduced you, or how did you stumble into the hobby?
I kind of sometimes can't remember when it was, but I think it was 12 or 13 years ago. I was teaching at a school in Brooklyn, and the math department there, we all shared one office. There were 20 of us in this teeny little New York office. And my first year there, which I guess was 14 years ago, we played a department game of diplomacy. And we were separated into 7 teams, and, as you can imagine, have you ever played diplomacy?
I haven't played it, but I did get to watch it at Geekway.
Okay, yeah. It is one of my favorite games because it's so unique, but it does take forever. And, it was something that we really sank our teeth into. And then I started playing it online a ton, and I was playing live games for 5 to 6 hours. And, just that really kind of hooked me on it. So then my buddy from there invited me over and we played Ticket to Ride. And I think that just started to get me going. But I don't know that I did a lot more for those years I lived in Brooklyn. Once I moved to St. Louis, which is where I'm from originally, I met another teacher who he showed me like Lost Cities, and he showed me Dominion was one that really like blew my brain open. And I was like in notebooks making notes about like how to keep track of what your deck is doing and stuff. I played Magic the Gathering when I was a kid, and loved like solitaire, and always played games and stuff like anybody else. But I think Dominion for me came at a time when those kind of ideas were really, I don't know, they grabbed me. That at that point I was a mathematical artist and a teacher. So I was making this art that would go to gallery somewhere that was really mathematical inspired. And then Dominion like hooked me onto the idea that I could make a game that was a little piece of mathematical art too. That was like this little crafted system that would give you some fun, And I was playing a lot of FTL, Faster Than Light, which is this roguelike computer game where you're spaceship fighting other spaceships and building up your arsenal and kind of engine building. And so my first game design was like, I tried to do an FTL deck builder, and it was just so bad. But that was kind of my start, was diplomacy. And I still probably play it at least once a year and don't ever get through the whole game.
Yeah, it was so like growing up and stuff for me, like my granny got me into just kind of games, rummy, Chinese checkers, stuff like that. And
totally.
then whenever I was working at a homeless drop-in shelter, there was a group of guys that would always hang out to the side. But they would play Magic, but they really wouldn't talk to anybody. So I learned to play Magic to kind of have an in with them.
Yeah.
To be able to try to connect them with resources and stuff like that to help them get out of their situation.
Yeah.
And then the more I looked up Magic stuff, I started, going down the rabbit hole and got onto Dice Tower, and it was like, oh, what are these?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
that kind of got me into it. And then I just recently played Dominion for the first time, and then Dominion, Ascension, and Star Realms.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And Star Realms is my favorite game still.
Okay.
I play, I don't know, I'm 13,000 games in or so on the app. And for a while I was top 100 on the lifetime leaderboard. But I don't play it quite as much, but I'm in the BGG leagues. I'm in lots of, Hero Realms tournaments and leagues and stuff. So that's my top. But too, I've always just been like a hobby guy. I like to sink my teeth into something and then, buy all the stuff and learn all the terminology and, kind of be on the niche side of something. I did it with drums and keyboards and, juggling for a long time, and then musical art and, mathematical art and math in general. So board game definitely gives you that opportunity to follow a path and have opinions on things that most people in the world would never care about, and so.
Yeah, it's helped me with just, mental health side. It's helped me out a lot because I would do a big like hobby jumping every 3-4 months.
Yeah.
And that can be expensive. Like, it's one of those you're like, oh, I'm super manic right now. I want to learn everything about this topic and I need to get all of this stuff to do it. You get all this stuff, and by then you're like, okay, I've lost interest.
Yeah.
So the good thing that I found with board gaming is like, oh, there's different games, there's different genres. Like, okay, cool. I'm not on deck building right now, so I'm going to go over here for some abstract games or whatever it may be. All of the different options still gives me that ability to jump hobbies, but still be within the same thing. So
yeah, I definitely, that resonates with me. That hobby jumping, I certainly did a lot of that. And this is probably the longest I've had a hobby, and I think partly too, it's just because it's so central to my social life now. I as an adult, it's so hard to have adult friendships, to make friends with people. and stay with each other, and having like a weekly Monday game night gives me all these, it gives me like a sort of a social anchor. And then having, going to a convention and seeing, dozens of people that I know from last year and other things and from the industry, it just kind of like gives me a grounding that I think was hard for me to find at certain times as an adult.
Yeah. So how did you move from playing games to designing games? What was kind of the kickoff for the desire to want to design a game, and then what's been the process of designing?
Yeah. I think partly it's just like I am the kind of person that wants to make stuff or like make a little contribution to the area that I'm interested in. So, when I was listening to music and I was like really obsessed with music as a kid, like the Beatles or Ben Folds or something, I always wanted to know like, well, how did they do that? Or making, how did they make this movie? How did they get that shot? How was this pointillism picture made? And once I got to the point of games, like understanding the rules, help you understand how they made it, but also then like you have this added layer of the way that the rules make a dynamic system that encourage you to do some things and make other things not happen. Like that was just really interesting for me. So I just wanted to try at some point. And like I said, with FTL, I thought I had a really cool setting and I was going to, come up with something. And I had some cool ideas, and I made a game that was playable. And we play tested it a ton with my students and they loved it. But it's just not really that good. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I think I put that away, and my next idea was to kind of use what I know from my mathematical art experience to kind of leverage that and come up with something kind of new. So I came up with what was going to end up being the tile system in Honeybuzz, and then decided that it would be about bees because of the way the tiles worked, and did a ton of research. So, getting into it was just sort of like likely for me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And lucky enough, I work at a school, so I have people that play test my games. I live in a great city for game design, St. Louis, where there's many publishers and an active game design meetup group. So, and then it was a chain of meeting people and them kind of helping me out and bringing me in for development and play tests and stuff.
So at what point in the design process do you kind of know to like pitch the idea? That it's kind of not going anywhere, or you kind of just shelf it and maybe come back to it later?
It's interesting because I think that, one thing that's not my strength as a designer is to have an idea and quickly prototype it and get something in front of strangers and then be like, this works, and pitch it to a publisher and think they're going to finish it and make it exactly the way that they want. I think there's a lot of designers that do that, and a lot of them I really respect. But I think for me, I want to have something, and it's not really a good trait on my part, but I want something that's more finished, that's a little more like I have a clear vision of it being something that I want it to be. So it's a longer road. I think with that first game, it never got there. I just thought I was going to maybe kickstart it before I really understood that would be a terrible idea. With Honeybuzz, it was probably 2 years in where it was like we had played it a bunch and thought it was fun, and I pitched it to Genius Games, and they said that it wasn't quite hard science enough, but then he connected me with Jamie Stegmaier, and I pitched it to him, and so there was a couple years of that. And then the other games that I've published with Genius, they really brought me on from the start to work on them. So it wasn't something that I did on my own and then pitched. But I don't really have that much experience with it. I think I've got a couple games now that I would pitch to Elf Creek, kind of in the Honeybuzz universe, but I would just do it when I felt like the design was pretty close to done. Mm-hmm. That I felt like, because I think there's times where people will hand off a design to whatever publisher, and then they'll change the theme and change the core mechanisms, and it comes out a bit different than you would expect. And I want to make something that kind of makes so much sense that you don't want to change it. There's if you like Honey Buzz, if you made it not a B game, it just wouldn't make sense.
Right.
It's the mechanisms are supposed to be kind of baked into the theme. At least that's the way that I treat it. Like Genotype is clearly about Punnett squares, and I guess you could just make it an abstract thing, but it's so congealed together as a theme mechanical little puzzle poem that you don't want to do that stuff, you know? Because ultimately, like if I hand something over and it gets changed a ton, it won't feel like it's the game that I designed, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, those are my mechanisms.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, that's my game.
Right.
Gotcha. So what's it been like working with a couple different publishers, as far as, collaborating and stuff like that? I imagine there's a lot of people that go into bringing a game to life between the artists and the proofreaders and playtesters, all of that. What's been your experience with just having that opportunity to work with multiple publishers and all of the people involved with that?
I work primarily with the Elf Creek team right now because the Honey Buzz stuff is still in development. Like we have an expansion coming out, and we have other ones in the works, and maybe kind of spin-off titles. And their team is amazing. They have their Slack channel or I guess it's a whole thing on Slack. But, they've got multiple graphic designers, and I've worked on a couple different projects with them. And so it's just cool too, because they have a community of people that they'll post art on, and then everybody's kind of giving feedback about it. I love the way that Elf Creek has kept me so involved, because publisher almost never has to do that, and I don't think that that's how they've handled every publisher necessarily that they've worked with, every designer that they've worked with, but it's been awesome. And I could not be happier with, we talk about the next project, and they give me some guidelines about, well, here are the components that we want to make sure is there. Here's kind of the price point. And there's just a really nice back and forth where sometimes late in a project, I can say, no, I think this component really needs to be this slightly more expensive thing. And they'll find a way to do it. And, Elf Creek especially, compared to, I think, what I assume about a lot of publishers, they're so driven by putting out a really compelling final project. They've been amazing. Genius Games also, I spent for probably 2 years, I was over there about once a week, doing play testing, doing development. We started working on Genotype, I don't remember when exactly, but about 1.5 or 2 years before Honey Buzz came out, and went through a whole version of it, back and forth, me and John Covey, who's the lead designer and owner there, and took it to a Stonemeyer design day, and then handed it off to a developer, Ian Zhang, and it came back. So again, that's like a long road, but working with a co-designer feels really different than working with somebody at Elf Creek who owns the thing and is sort of the product manager, but still knows kind of, hey, you're the designer. As opposed to if I'm working with you, but you also own the company, we're both designers, but you own the company, it's a slightly different dynamic. I would love to work with them again, and I have some ideas for games that might go to Genius again, but their system changed to where they're working primarily in the day, and they have a full-time developer. So my role isn't as constant over there at this point.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So for anyone who may not have played Honey Buzz yet, what would be your elevator pitch for it to get somebody interested in it?
Well, the bees of Sweetwater Grove have discovered economics, and they feel that if they open a honey stand in the woodland market, then the bears and the raccoons and the woodland creatures won't destroy their hive. And that's the key to peace and prosperity. So you serve as Her Majesty's accountants, and it's your job to manage a section of the workforce to expand your hive, forage for nectar, turn the nectar into honey, and then sell that stuff for points. That's kind of the thematic pitch. And then mechanically, it's a worker bee placement game. You've got a little, a swarm of your beeples that you're sending out to the board to get these.
I love beeples.
Yeah. And the beeples were designed by one of my former students who was in 7th grade at that time.
Nice.
The final design is really close to what he came up with. So you're going and you're getting these double hexagon tiles, which are pretty unique. And the way that you put them together makes empty spaces for the nectar. And the shape that you create, like the pattern that you create around that, determines what type of nectar you can have. And when those close up, you trigger some action combos. And it's a very kind of combo-rific type of thing with drop-dead gorgeous art by Anne Heidseek. And plays in about 40 minutes for 1 to 4 players. Fun little thing.
So you've got an expansion coming out for it, Fall Flavors.
Yeah.
And it's wrapped up on Kickstarter, right? Or
It's
you can
done
still
on
late
Kickstarter.
pledge?
The only thing we're doing before production right now is, I think, checking box sizes, making sure that the box sizes are good for the stuff we're putting in them. And then we're going to, they'll manufacture it, all that stuff. The pledge manager, I think, closes at the end of this month. So we're getting very close. And that, I'm really excited for that to come to market. Yeah.
So is it a standalone expansion, or do you have to have the base game to play as well?
It is not an expand-alone. We thought about that. We were kind of going to do similar to the way that you have like Ticket to Ride Europe, which is basically the same game, but has like a tweak. Or Patchwork Fall is basically the exact same game, but maybe it has a tweak or different art or whatever. So we were going to do that with kind of fall honey varieties, but ultimately what we landed on is an expansion, a modular expansion. It's got a ton of content, I think 5 different modules that are fall related and really fun. So one of the things in there is that the hive tiles, you get some new hive tiles that have leaves on one side. And so when you get these tiles, you put them in your hive, and at the end of the game, you'll score some bonus points based on what kind of leaves you've collected. But typically, those leaves are going to be revealed when someone's placed a worker to get a tile off that stack. So in order to go get that, it's going to cost you extra worker cost. So there's kind of a cost for reward mechanism there with some set collection. There's a new field of flowers. The whole bottom woodland board changes to a fall art. With new honey varieties instead of acacia. What is it? In the original game, we have wildflower, rosemary, cherry blossom, and acacia. And in the new one, it's sunflower, buckwheat, strawberry tree, and aster, I think. But you're using the same tokens, really. But those are all actual kind of fall varieties. And then the field itself kind of takes a new shape. You move around this new hexagonal grid. Rather than getting pollen, you collect fall fruits that you can sell at the market as well and fulfill a new type of honey glazed fruit order. And that's just two of the modules. There's basically 3 other things in there with tons of new art, new components, and you can mix and match these things pretty much as you want. You can play solo with them for people that love that kind of thing. And then, from the Kickstarter, there was an add-on for a totally new, just a new deck of order cards that had all new animals and fall art and stuff. So it's just an aesthetic dream. It's just gorgeous to, be around.
Yeah, it's an absolute gorgeous game. I bought the base game at Geekway.
Awesome.
I got to play with you, and
Yep.
then you taught me, my wife, and then my buddy Josh over at Meeple House Games.
Yeah.
You sat down with us, played it with us, and you were super patient. My wife, she was terrified. I went back to the hotel room the day before, and I was like, "Hey, we've got this event tomorrow. I signed you up to play with the designer of the game." And she's not. She says she hates board games, and I think what it is she hates learning new board games because I can get her to play a game that she knows.
Yeah.
So like Parks, Wingspan, Honey Buzz, like she'll play those with me if her mom's playing.
Yeah.
But she won't learn a new board game with just me. So
That's
when
funny.
I was like,
well, I mean, somehow she made it to Geekway, so you're doing okay.
Yeah, well, she just wanted, 4 days out of the house.
Yeah, yeah.
She was like, I'm just going to sit in the hotel, read. She's like, come pick me up for lunch, dinner, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll go out, find something to do a couple days a week, or a couple of the days, and then you go do your nerd thing. But yeah, you were super patient with us, and like you were teaching her basically like, hey, these are your options. Like me and Josh had already played, I think 5 times or so at Geekway.
Yeah. That's many. That's
a lot. She ended up winning,
Yeah.
She had the designer in a corner, ended up winning.
Well, I try to do like 3 or 4 different levels of like help that I can offer people. And if I'm just doing a demo, then I'll kind of start walking people through their turns. But if I'm doing a full playthrough, I say, this is your game. So if you want to play it exactly and think as much as you want, go for it. But level 1 is like, I'm totally hands off. Level 2 is like, I'll suggest to you various, here's what you might do. And then level 3 is like, I'm going to take your turns for you, and that gives people kind of the ability to control, because I don't want people to feel like they think that I think that they're stupid. You know what I mean? I don't want them to feel like, okay, wow, every time it was my turn, he just told me exactly what to do. But at the same time, I want them to feel like, I don't want them to feel frustrated. I basically say, hey, if you get to the point where it's not fun, just ask a question, just happy to do that. And being a teacher, I have a lot of experience with patience and answering questions and, people missing.
I was going to ask if you thought that transferred over from, teaching skills and stuff that you learned.
For sure. And I'm in my game group, I'm typically the game teacher also. I really like to do that. I feel like both in my teaching experience and from like my math, personality, crafting like the best way to teach something and explain it and use good language and answer questions and pay attention to who understands what and doesn't is something that I'm very good at. And it's painfully hard for me sometimes to like listen to somebody else teach a game badly. I'm not saying that's like, that's like a little bit of a trait that I don't love about myself, but, it is, I just think, ooh, sometimes people are missing it,
Yeah. So you mentioned, it brings 5 different modules. One of the ones that really caught my eye was the sunset module.
Yeah.
I was watching a playthrough. I kind of caught it, but I kind of didn't.
Sure.
So it seems like that acts as a end of game trigger itself. Exactly. What all triggers that though to move the sunset down?
So this is partly came out of a need to control the game length with all these different modules in play because, for example, one of the modules is nectar caps and you're grabbing these tiles and covering your nectar. But when those are gone, the game needs to nudge towards its end. Otherwise, it has a totally different feel at the end as opposed to the beginning. Same thing with the Harvest Festival, which is kind of like a garden party where the bees, when they retire for the season, they go and propose toasts and stuff. And if all of those spots fill, then the game needs to kind of be approaching its end. And we didn't want to make them just like, oh, if that happens, the game's over. Or if this happens, the game's over. We could have done that. We could have said, these are the normal game triggers, but if this happens, it's also one, or if this. But the sunset kind of is a more natural blend of whatever you have going on. So you've got basically the way it's going to work is you've got a little sunset board with a beautiful picture of the setting sun and a token that is going to kind of descend along these. I think it's 6 spaces, so it makes 5 jumps. And if you run out of nectar in the field, it moves a step forward. Because that's kind of like the season is running out, fall is approaching as the nectar dries up. Or if one of the resource prices drops to the bottom, it takes a step forward. Or if you run out of nectar caps, it takes a step forward. Fill the Harvest Festival takes a step forward. If you empty a stack of orders, it goes 2 steps forward. And the other one, which is pretty important for a reason I'll explain here in a minute, is if you run out of a stack of tiles, then it would also moved a step forward. And what we found was that in the base game, people really needed this. Lost you for a second there, but I was still talking, so I'm going to keep going.
Okay, good.
When you empty a stack of tiles from the tile stacks, that also moves it a step forward. What we saw on Board Game Geek is that sometimes people play the game in a way that we did not foresee in any of our years of development and playtest, partly because it was just the way that we played or, whatever. But some people, when they play the base game of Honey Buzz, will run out of all of the tiles because they're not selling aggressively, I guess. Sometimes they might be making rules mistakes, but we think that you can genuinely do this. I don't think it's probably the best way to play. I think strategically maybe that's, lacking, but it is a way to play the game. So now, if you play with this sunset module, even in your base game plays, if that's the only thing that you use is the sunset module, you'll have a kind of a more, more natural conclusion to the game where, a mixture of one of the stacks is gone, two of the prices are gone, and a tile stack is gone. That would end the game.
Right.
I
was excited about that because I've played with I've got a couple different play groups, and one of the play groups, granted they were drunk, they were like, "Man, this game's taking forever." And I'm like, "Well, out of the four of us, I'm the only one completing orders or selling nectar. Nobody else is trying to trigger end game."
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they want to get as much nectar as they can, but ultimately that's not points, and so you still have to drive at points in the game. Honey is money after all. But one thing I've posted on BGG is that, for people that have the base game, you can include these kind of sunset rules now. You don't have to wait for the expansion to come out and just take another token, a die or something that you have, and put it on the pollen track one step below the top. And I think it will have 5 steps to go down to the bottom. And so you can just follow those exact rules, and it will probably give your games a nicer shape.
So I just I did a late pledge for Fall Flavors because I'd missed whenever it was still open, and you guys offered the base version of it and then the deluxe version of it, and then for the original Honey Buzz game, you had the same thing but also the upgrade packs.
Yep.
So what's the thought process of having the option for people to go out and buy the standard game and go, "Oh, I really like this. I'm going to go ahead and get the upgrade packs," instead of making them go straight to either standard or deluxe, no in between.
Yeah, I think Elf Creek wants to avoid Kickstarter exclusive stuff as much as they can. They do have some products that are like Elf Creek exclusive that you can only get on their web store or something after the campaign. But I think this is part of it, that they wanted people that, got a standard edition, retail edition as a gift, or just picked it up on a whim at a store or something, the opportunity to, upgrade it later. I think based on my kind of experience, most of the copies that will sell, we'll sell more deluxe editions than we'll sell upgrade packs. But it's nice to have it there as an option.
Yeah. I really like that because it doesn't force that there's such a short term of sell here. This is your short opportunity.
Yeah,
between
and that FOMO
$40
I think
or
is
$80.
really a bummer. And it unfortunately though, the hobby is so I don't know what it had. With Kickstarter and everything, it's taken such a weird place where it's like when we had our campaign up, we had, we want to offer the people that can afford to buy stuff that they want, everything that they want to buy. So we wanted to include in the fall version some fall player pieces, fall colored player pieces, but the price point would be too high. So we took that out and just made that a separate add-on, or I don't remember how much. But some people were really frustrated.
I think it was 25.
Yeah, and they're really frustrated that, and it's 40. I think it's 40 beeples plus 4 new Hive player boards, plus foraging tokens, plus fan tokens. So there's a lot of pieces in there. It's not like they're trying to create some crazy margin, but people, we saw comments like, I honestly wish that product didn't exist. And I don't know. I think it's a hard thing. We play in a luxury hobby, and we don't need any of the stuff. So I don't know. It's just kind of a bummer sometimes with all the, and I think that there's companies out there too that really play on that, and it's a bummer,
Yeah. Oh, here's a $400 Kickstarter.
Yeah, and here's the all-in that you've never played this game and you never will play all of the stuff, but they know that there are people that have strong compulsions to get that stuff. They don't want to not have the things, and I don't know.
Yeah, I'm one of those.
Yeah,
that's another one of the completionists in me. Which I think the only two games that I've got completely completed is I have all of the Scythe, like metal components, meeple upgrades, 3D Factory. The 3D Factory, I've got well over $1,000 into Scythe.
Wow. Yeah.
But I love it. It was the first board game, modern board game, that I bought after getting into Magic and stuff. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And then I have everything for Arkham Horror the living card game.
Nice.
I've got everything for it that's came out, at least that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
As far as all of the sets, all of the packs.
Right on.
So those are my big two completionist things. But yeah, I'm very apt to let me get this expansion, and my wife's like, you haven't even played the base game yet.
Yeah, yeah. I think it. You get to a point, or at least I feel like I am now, where I have a pretty good sense of what I'm going to actually like, and what is just not actually for me. And a new game just came out on Kickstarter today. It was Thunderworks Dawn of Ulos, which is in the role player universe that I really like. And I got a kind of a pitch of it at Gen Con, and I think it's a really cool design. I think there's so many things in it that are interesting. It has this mechanism of, you use 5 of the 10 different powers in the game in the same way that you use 6 of the 12 in Ethnos. And I love that. I think some very cool stuff. But I also know that it's got kind of some stock holding and blind bidding, and it's just probably not for me. And I buy enough games that I'm not going to do that one. I'd love to try it, but I don't think I need to own it.
Yeah. I just backed it today.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. Have you ever played Acquire?
I have not.
Okay. Acquire, if you don't know, is a very old game. I think it's from the 70s or earlier. And these companies are growing until they merge, and then one absorbs the other. And in Dawn of Ulos, these, I don't know if they're called powers or races or something, tribes, they might be called tribes. They grow and grow and grow until they collide, and then they battle. But everybody at the table has a control in who wins the battle. And you're trying to kind of have favor with the ones that end up on top through this battling thing.
Gotcha.
And I think it's a very cool system.
Yeah, I actually get to interview the designer on Sunday, Jason.
Awesome.
I've got this set up with him on this coming Sunday, and I was so worried because he's out of Sweden, and I'm like, this is going to be so hard to coordinate a time with.
Yeah.
And it was 2 emails.
Cool.
We had a time locked out. I was
definitely ask him about Acquire. I mean, I'm sure that was kind of on his radar as he designed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned, there might be some more Honey Buzz stuff in the works, future expansions, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is it kind of just going along the lines of maybe some upgrade packs or some, just some little packs of cards that may add more of orders or more,
so
more of
far
the contests?
So far what we've done is we released the original Honey Buzz, and then all of the kind of Kickstarter goodies that were free to backers became a mini expansion called the Honey Pot. And it has one modular, rule changing thing, and then just a lot of new stuff, new order cards, new stuff. Then with the Fall Flavors expansion, we did the same thing. So you can buy Fall Flavors. And then we had kind of all the Kickstarter add-ons, or not add-ons, but freebies, the goodies, those are in another mini expansion called the Cornucopia, which has one modular thing. So it's kind of an expansion to the expansion, which is a little odd, but there's some very cool stuff. And then again, more contest cards, more order cards, stuff like that, more configuration cards. So that's kind of where we are so far. The plan going forward is probably one more modular expansion on the same scale as Fall Flavors. The details aren't really finalized, but my plan is kind of, the theme is sort of business school or back in business or something. And thematically, it's going to be kind of training your workers, maybe going up tech tracks type of thing. And then mechanically, it's going to really, it's going to enhance what you can do on the turns when you recall your workers. Because right now on Honeybuzz, it's sort of a lesser turn. And one of the benefits of having more workers is just that you can delay that longer and longer. And I think there's a lot of potential for what goes on in that turn. And then that will probably be it for the Honeybuzz world. Again, there'll be like another mini expansion that comes out along that Kickstarter, some kind of a big box to store everything in. But then in terms of the Honeybuzz proper, I think it might stop there. There's definitely other games going on in the Sweetwater Grove universe that will have art by Anne Heidseek again, and hopefully kind of fall on that same level where it's like gorgeous and family friendly, but also has, meat in it. It has some strategy gamer stuff. Like Honeybuzz is a top 100 family game of all time on Board Game Geek, but it's also a top 300 strategy game of all time on Board Game Geek. And I think that's a really cool kind of spot to fill. So, and there's Mondo Davis and I are working on some sort of maybe a Honeybuzz card game. I'm working on a sort of a stamp collecting game that might be set in that universe. There's something that has to do with badgers that I think, Daryl Andrews is working on. There's other stuff. Or beavers, not badgers. Beavers build the dams, right? So it's beavers. Yeah.
So how did you come up with the Sweetwater Grove, like the setting and all that?
Actually, I think most of the guy at Elf Creek who's the real thematic guy is Brent Dickman, who's the president. My developer on the project was Mike Hinson, co-owner, and he and I worked more on mechanics, but then it was Brent who wanted to kind of tease out some of the, really what are the creatures of this world, what animals are allowed to show up in the art, what plants are allowed to be here, and it was kind of like a North American, European kind of thing, but he goes really deep into that kind of stuff to where, again, when we were choosing the honey varieties that we wanted to use, we wanted them to be popular, right? We wanted people to know about them. We wanted them to be pronounceable, but they all needed to bloom at the same time in spring, kind of in a similar landscape, and the colors of them had to be close to the colors of the tokens that we were using. So, and then he did that again when we went to the fall, and again in the choice of animals that we use, they all kind of fall along those lines. So there's not going to be like a kangaroo, certain things are going to appear and certain things are not going to appear, kind of along those lines. It's not lizards, right? So that was really Brent Dickman came up with that. And then ultimately, Anne Heidseek brought it to life. Her art is the backbone of what makes it such a beautiful thing to sit down and touch and look at. And, the art alone. Bears,
You pass, I don't know how many people at Geekway, me and Josh were playing, and people would just pass and you could see them look and then kind of back up.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. The artwork's great. So Someyer, they're doing their 10-year anniversary. They announced a Honeybuzz promo for Rolling Realms.
For sure.
Were you involved in the design of that? Or
I was, yeah. Jamie is a buddy of mine. I talked about getting introduced to him through John Covey and pitching him Honeybuzz. But he and I go out and play disc golf most weekends. And when the Rolling Realms kind of promos were starting. I had play tested some of them for him and told him, actually, I think he reached out to us and asked said he really liked Honey Buzz. I think it was his number one game for players that love Wingspan, and on one of his top 10. So he wanted to do that, and I said I would sort of do some development and pitch or design. And so he and I went back and forth. I would come up with a design and send it to him. He gave me some feedback. I would do another one, send it back. So we had about 3 or 4 rounds of designs going back and forth, and then I play tested it mostly with my students, and I'm really excited to see it come out.
Yeah. And then they announced 2 other packs with it.
Yep.
I'm blanking on what the other
Feast
the
for
other
Odin,
2 were.
Which is very
Feast for
cool.
Odin.
And as you might imagine, it has like a kind of a polyomino tile laying thing. And then the other one is for Smitten, which was just announced, I think, today.
Yeah.
Which is like a little 9 card or 18 card mini game. I haven't played it. I've play tested the Realm, and I'm sure it's cool, but can't remember that much about it. Yeah.
So, kind of just more into general board games now.
Yeah.
Is there any particular publisher outside of the ones that you've worked with that you gravitate toward? Is there anything that you see somebody release a title and it's almost like at least you're definitely going to look at it if it's not already an instant buy for you?
I definitely have kind of instant buys for some designers, and I think I'm a little more drawn to that. But there are some publishers that I really love and would love to work with. I think that Keymaster Games is definitely on my list of. I just think their products are they're doing what I want them to do so much. Parks, everything from the art, which they didn't do that. That was the 59 Parks project. But the art, the shape of the pieces, the game trays they use, the inserts, they do such good inserts and boxes. Paper Europe I just got and really love. And the art and the production on that box is just like so good. So they're definitely on my list. I don't know what I have exactly to pitch them. Unless they get excited about stamp collecting, and then that would be cool. I would love to do a game with Jamie at Stonemeyer. I just think he's an amazing game developer. Like what he did with Libertalia, I think was excellent, and so much of his. And really, honestly, when I was learning about game design, I was reading his blog and trying to sort of think along the lines of what he was doing. So he's been really influential, and I think. Obviously, it would be great also to sell a ton of copies with Jamie. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
But also, I'd love to do another Elf Creek game. The stuff that they've done since I worked with them too. First in Flight, I think is awesome. Cellulose, I think is awesome. I don't know if I've played any other ones. But and those are my buddies too. So, 25th Century Games, I think, is doing really cool stuff with what they did with Raw. And I think there's I think Chad's really cool. So there's a handful. Anybody that wants to work with me, of course, I'd be thrilled.
Yeah, I just got the expansion for Parks.
Yeah,
and it looks gorgeous. And,
yeah.
I'm right in the Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky tri-state area, and like I live in Ohio, but everything I do is in West Virginia, basically. Like I work there, my wife works there. There's more. Food options and everything on just like that side of the bridge because within 15 minutes I can hit all 3 states. But New River Gorge was announced as a national park after the original parks came out. So there was a ton of people that were like from West Virginia or always visiting West Virginia that was like, hey, can we get a promo card for this? Cool. Like, what are you all doing? So they included it in the new expansion. There's a New River Gorge card.
That's so cool.
So I'm excited about that more than I should be.
No, totally. Yeah.
I've
gotten very into
3 hours away from me.
Okay. That's right on. You've been there,
it's gorgeous. They do Bridge Day every year where you got people, base jumping off the bridge.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
It's a big festival.
Yeah.
There's tons of beautiful stuff though in the area between that, Hocking Hills in Ohio.
Nice.
We've actually got a bunch of us which I've got Josh, who I met at Geekway.
Mm-hmm.
We've stayed in contact since then, and he's in Colorado, and he's flying in to Columbus. And I'm going to pick him up in January. And there's it's Ravenswood Castle,
Okay.
and it's in Ohio.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and a half outside of Columbus. And it's just like this giant castle, and they've got rooms that you can rent, and they've each got like their own theme. There's like the King Arthur room, the Rapunzel room, just absolutely beautiful. But then they've got cabins on the ground. You know, they've got the fisherman's cabin, they've got the Skinner's cabin. So they're all themed. So we've got a group of five cabins that we've rented out. That's like secluded off to the corner.
That's awesome.
And we're just going to nerd it out for 3 days.
Yeah. I know the tri-state crowd listening to this is thrilled by all the tri-state local talk.
Yeah.
Big time, for sure. I'll tell you one more publisher that I'm really excited about, too, is White Wizard Games, because they publish my favorite 2 games, Star Realms and Hero Realms, and I got to play test a thing or two for them, and if I ever had, or if they ever came to me or whatever and said, hey, we want you to do this kind of thing with Star Realms, I would be so excited to work on that.
I'm assuming that you've already backed the campaign for Star Realms that's coming out.
Well, yes, I backed it and I play tested it a little bit, and it's very very cool. It's such a breath of fresh air to everything that Star Realms is. I mean, it just feels wild. It's really cool.
Nice. What 2 factions do you usually, or do you gravitate toward particular 2 factions when you play?
It's bad to do, right? The game wants you to be flexible, but I do gravitate towards red scrap. I like to get a deck that's very small and tight. I feel like red blue is kind of what I tend to play the most, and then just stuff that draws cards. But with the commanders, one of my favorite ones is Commander Lee, who was originally believed to be kind of the weakest of the 6 main commanders. But I feel like I've been instrumental in explaining to people, like, no, this is a real thing to play, and that's red-yellow, and it very quickly scraps its cards and gets you to discard cards. And actually, Jackie Chastain, I think, won the Origins 2019 10K tournament using Lee, and was like one of those first moments of like, whoa, okay, so this is actually a good commander set to use. Yeah,
like this one's viable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I usually go toward the green and the yellow factions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why.
Fight. Yeah.
Well, and then if like Stealth Needle comes out, like I'll throw a splash of red in there.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
So kind of get to like wrapping it up where we're approaching the hour.
Yeah, that's cool.
Kind of what 5 games are you most excited about right now? Maybe not even necessarily your top 5 picks, but what's maybe the most 5 recent games that you'd love to get to the table again?
All right. So yesterday I played Heaven and Ale for the first time, and found that to be very, I don't even know what to say. Like, my friends and I were kind of like, is it good? But we think it is good. It was it reminds me a lot of Palaces of Carrera, which I really like, which is that it's pretty simple. It's not very complicated what you do on your turn. The rules aren't crazy, but how to achieve your goals, how to manage your money, how to pop these combos are very cool. And the drafting in it was awesome. So that's definitely number 1. Number 2, Cat in the Box. Played that with those same buddies, and I do like a lot of trick-taking games. I'm a huge fan of Wizard, and this thing is wild. It's such a cool execution of the idea. I don't know that I have a lot of people I can play it with, which is kind of my one complaint about trick-taking games, but I'm definitely excited to play more of that. Let's see what else. Game 3, I'm going to go with Paper Tales. Haven't played it in a little while, but as I picture my shelf in my head, it's standing out to me. That's one of my favorite drafting games. The art's super cool. You can play it 7 players would always play that over Seven Wonders. Let's go to... I played the Guild of Merchant Explorers recently from Matt Dunstan, who I think is a really sharp designer. I'm excited to play that again. I'm bummed out I didn't realize there were map packs I could get at Gen Con. But that has a cool sense of progression, and it plays really fast. It's a little bit of the multiplayer solitaire that I don't usually like. I think I've done 3, right? Or maybe I've done, I don't know.
I think that was 4.
It's a bummer, because now I've got others that I want to do. All right, I'm going to say A War of Whispers, which I don't know if you know much about that game. But
I do not.
I didn't back it on Kickstarter. I didn't really know about it, but it's on my shelf. Bought a deluxe edition after playing it one time with my buddies, or actually a couple of folks. They're also my buddies, I guess. And this is kind of like, it's a little bit like Game of Thrones. There are 5 competing factions trying to fight each other on this board and take over and, control the cities. But you don't play as those 5 factions. You play as the counselors to those 5 factions. And you have secret alliances, secret allegiances. There's one faction that you are devoutly, allied to. And then they go down the path. And so at the end of the game, whoever is your top faction, you get like 3 points, I think. What is it? Maybe it's 5 points for every city that they control. And then the next one, you get like 3. And then you get 2. And then you get 0. And then you get -1. And so, but you want to keep that a secret a little bit. And then after each round, you get the chance to like switch your allegiances, which means that you'll reveal and swap 2 tokens. And now everybody knows that I wanted the Horse Clan to take over. And maybe that influences what they do, or maybe they switch to that. So it's also this crazy cool worker placement thing, and it plays like lightning quick. I think for me, it's like the experience of diplomacy in an hour instead of 12 hours. And so I'm excited to get War of Whispers back to the table. Oh, bonus. It's Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Just got the Kickstarter, and you were talking about the castle. You got to play Castles of Mad King Ludwig at the castle.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And I think the expansion is really fun. It's a crazy production, and played it twice. Loved it both times. That's like a top 20 game for me.
Awesome. So then the last question is just, why is gaming good? Like, why should people play board games?
Well, for me, gaming is good because it is a social thing that feels really comfortable to me. It helps me connect with my students. It helps me connect with strangers. It helps me connect with my friends. And it gives me like a structure to my interactions that I think is calming, that it sort of alleviates the uncertainty of, socializing. For me, that's not always easy. Like my least favorite thing to do would be like to go out to a bar and drink and just talk to each other. This really helps understand like, okay, this is how long this is going to be. I think too, it can help you understand other people. You can interact in ways that are much lighter stakes. It's not always about you and who you are and if other people like you and whether the thing that you did last week is a good enough story to tell somebody. You can just take your turn, and it creates a little experience for you to like interact. I think that's really fun. It's just playful, Play is fun, is good. It's good to play, and remember that things don't have to be so serious, And lastly, people should play games because sometimes they're invited to play games by the people that care about them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Not everybody is going to be in this hobby, and not the majority of people that play games aren't on Board Game Geek, and they're not going to know all the terminology that I was talking about earlier. But, if you get asked to play games, give it a try, see how it goes. And also, hey, give yourself a chance to not understand something. Walk into a new situation and go, okay, this is confusing. Let me see if I can sit through a whole rules explanation and know that after they say the first 5 sentences, there's still going to be 25 sentences I don't understand coming. Let's see if I can just wait for all that stuff to come. It's like a really good learning experience. So yeah, I think games are a great thing. Give them a try out there.
Yeah, and I would add to that, invite people to play games.
Yeah, totally.
Especially, I just did an event last Saturday at the public library.
Mm-hmm.
There was a few people that showed up, and they showed up to the event specifically for playing board games.
Yeah.
But they got there and just kind of sat down in the corner. And it is one of those instances like, hey, I've got a table of 20 games right now.
Right.
What catches your eye? Like, what do you want to learn? I'll teach you. I'll play with you. And you could just see like their face light up.
Mm-hmm.
They were, younger teens.
Sure. Oh, that's awesome.
So it was just one of those, like people that invite you want you to play. They want to know about you. So.
And that feels so good too. It's like, if we're at a library and there's 2 teens over there or 2 older people or people my age or whatever, I'm never going to be like, hey, let's talk to each other. Let's interact. Let's do something. But if games are on the table and people are in the room understanding what's going on, it's like it gives you this venue to open and be like, hey, I don't know you guys, but do we want to try to do this thing together? And they understand the confines of that, and it's so much more comfortable.
Yeah.
And it feels great to be invited, It just feels good to like connect with people you don't know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was one of my concerns at Geekway. It was my first con. My wife went with me, but she stayed in the hotel.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to know anybody here.
Yeah.
I'm super socially awkward.
Yep.
But they had the Meetup app or the Meeple Meetup.
Sure. Yeah.
I had games going the entire week.
That's so cool.
Or the entire weekend. Like there wasn't ever a time where I was just sitting there like, man, I wish I could find something like either I had posted an event and people were coming up, or I'd look for other posted events. And as soon as I walk up to the table, come on. Yeah. So it was great.
Do you have some events coming up for you guys?
I do. We've got a few more scheduled with some libraries. So this coming Saturday, September 10th, 12 to 4, at the Cabell County Public Library main branch. They actually just got community funding to be able to get a board game collection that people can play. So they just started that last month.
Huge.
And then Sunday, September 25th, 12 to 2, we've got the board game brunch at Cicada Books and Coffee. I think it's like $10 and it's some sandwich, fruit, drinks, all of that. But you can just also come and just play games.
Yum.
And then Thursday, September 29th, 5 to 8, we've got another HerdCon event that HerdCon's sponsoring, and it's just another board game night. We had probably eight students show up last month when we did it. It was our very first one.
Oh, that's so good.
Last weekend at the library, it was 10 people that showed up, and it was the very first one. So
fabulous, dude. Congrats.
Spreading the joy of games.
That's so cool.
Is there anything you want to plug before you go? Any Twitter handles, Facebook pages, Kickstarters?
I mean, the kind of the hub for finding anything out about me is paulsalomon.com. And you can find links to my email or to my Instagram. Most of my social media presence is on Instagram. I'm posting about games. I'm posting about national parks. I'm posting about my kids. I'm posting about math. It's all there, but you get a lot of me if you want any of me. And yeah, reach out if you got any questions or anything. You can also find me on Board Game Geek if you want to message me there, but I'm pretty accessible, dude.
Sounds great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's been kind of me just going on this journey of, hey, I'm going to try to interview board game designers with no knowledge of interviewing or video editing or anything, and just jump in and learn it.
Yeah. You ask questions, you're interviewing. That's it. You're doing a great job, Corey.
All right. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
Take care.